Hey, how's it going guys? Ricky Summer here, and today I've come back in time to talk about the Ascent. But first, a message from our sponsor.
Come for the opportunities. Stay for the culture. Bay City.
Okay, so what's the Ascent? The Ascent is a cyberpunk twin-stick shooter with RPG elements. It's kind of a little bit deceptive. At first, what I was hoping for was a Diablo-style ARPG. You know, it's isometric, you got loot, you got upgrading of a character, customization. That's what I was expecting. It's not quite that. But the game is still really fun, and what it does well. Alright, so before we get into the meat of the issue here, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. I did receive a copy of the game for free from the devs, but that does not color my opinion of the game one way or the other. Luckily, they sent it to me almost 2 weeks early, which is great, hugely helpful, and that means I was able to actually beat the game. So we can call this a review. Why not? Hey, let's go. Okay, so let's talk about skills, loot, general structure of the game. The skills are fairly limited in quantity, but they are quite interesting. So you don't pick a class, you just create a character, and there's a decent amount of customization, especially for a game like this, and you can pick a main and a secondary color palette that you can change throughout the game. You can pick a couple of different facial features and whatnot, which you can also change at cyber docks throughout the world, and that's also where you swap out your abilities. So the Ascent has 3 active abilities, 8 skills, and 4 attributes. The way this works is your attributes are tied to 2 skills, and every time you level up, you have 3 points to spend in any of the 8 skills that then contribute to your attribute level that they are tied to. For example, tactical sense and critical hit rate are both lumped in with cybernetics. They are skills under the cybernetics attribute. So as I upgraded tactical sense and critical hit rate, cybernetics went up. So each of these skills have a passive bonus. For example, critical hit rate just increases the chance to score a critical hit. Tactical sense will increase the amount of charge you get for your tactical ability. We'll get to that in a second. All right, so the skills. Like I said, there are 3 active abilities. You've got 1 tactical ability, which is essentially a grenade slot, but you can put other things other than grenades in there, such as an automatic turret or even a friggin' mech that you can jump into, which is very cool. Doesn't do a lot of damage, but I think you're basically invulnerable for the duration of the skill. And of course, you do have a variety of grenades as well. And then you've got 2 augments, which are more like traditional abilities, and you trigger those with Q and E, or the bumpers on the controller. So the tactical ability uses tactical charge, and that is separate from your energy, your body energy. The augments do use your body energy, so that's like your mana bar, essentially. And these will increase as you level up and as you apply points into skills and whatnot, and it's also affected by your armor. So there are actually some pretty interesting abilities within the augments, and they're tied to attributes, so their effectiveness will vary based on your skills. So you can put together a build here, and you can adjust the build as you go. For example, I went for a cybernetics build, essentially. I just focused primarily on cybernetics with tactical sense and critical hit rate, which means I was able to use a lot of cybernetics abilities. Now, because there are only 2 slots, and there are a lot more than 2 cybernetic abilities, this meant that I could keep swapping out abilities and try different builds within the umbrella of cybernetics. But if I swapped in abilities that were tied to biometrics or frame or motorics, that would be less effective. So within cybernetics alone, I had stuff like summoning a ranged robot, summoning a melee robot. I could tag enemies to explode when they die, which essentially is I think the premise is you hack them and then they explode when you kill them. You could also do a similar thing, hacking enemies and transferring their life to you as you damage them. So it's a life leech ability, which is very cool. Lots of variety in there, which I appreciate a great deal. And like I said, you can swap them in and out throughout the game. So you do that at an NPC within the various non-hostile hub sections of the map. You can also do it in the field, but replacing one of your augments in the field drains all your energy. So it's not a huge deal because that energy will recharge. It's like I said, it's just like mana from any other ARPG. But look, you probably don't want to do it right in the middle of combat. So it looks like there's quite a lot of build diversity there, and you can actually respec your character for a fee, which, you know, once you get maybe halfway through the game, money starts to not become much of a problem at all. So you can respec and completely try something else. You do have multiple character slots if you'd rather just start again, but it's not the kind of game where you would run multiple characters at once. In a traditional ARPG, you might be playing as a warrior and then decide you actually want to play a necromancer, so you've got to start again with a new character, choose a necromancer, or choose the relevant skills that make the necromancer class if it's sort of like an undefined class sort of system. In the Ascent, it doesn't really work that way. You have so much freedom to respec and try different things with your single character that there's really no reason at all to start a new character unless you just want to play through the game again or play with friends. There is multiplayer here. I can't comment on it because I haven't tried it because, you know, pre-release and all that, no one to play with. But I will be checking that out for sure after release. So something else I found really interesting is the structure of the missions and the world. So it is actually quite an open world with a couple of exceptions. There are one or two places that you need to unlock through the main story, but for the most part, you can pretty much go anywhere you want at any time. The only restriction being high-level enemies that you just can't take out yet. There were two locations in particular that I just couldn't go to because the enemies were just way too hard. And there were situations where I tried to go there early with a side quest and I just had to back out because I couldn't do it. So what I found really interesting was from the very beginning of the game, you get side quests that will eventually lead you to places you can't go yet. So the game isn't structured in a traditional ARPG sense where you go to a hub, you do a bunch of missions, and you can guarantee that all those missions are going to be within your level, and then you move on to the next hub, and you do a bunch of missions, and they're all within your level, and you move on to the next part, right? It's not like that. You have so much freedom to go almost wherever you want from the beginning that you do run into these kind of skill gates, where you have to leave, do some main missions, or do some other side quests, level up a little bit, come back. There's also not much reason to grind. It's paced fairly well. There's usually a main mission or a side quest you can do to get those levels that you need to come back and do the side mission or the main mission that you were struggling with. And some of the main story missions do get quite difficult, and especially the ending. That being said, in some of these situations, I could get through it with just sheer determination and skill and just getting better at dodge rolling and being more tactical. Speaking of tactical, man, look, the more I talk about this game, the the more I find is in it. It feels really simple to play, but there's a surprising amount of juice in there. So let's talk about tactics. You have 3 levels of aiming. You have like default, I'm standing and I'm shooting, right? You can also aim down sights, which raises your aim a little bit so that you can shoot over cover. And you can also crouch. So you can actually take cover in this game. So it almost sometimes feels like a real-time XCOM. So you can take cover, aim down sights to like blindly shoot over cover, which is pretty cool. There are also situations where you want to be standing and aim higher to shoot over handrails or shoot over cover that enemies are in. Sometimes enemies will just crouch behind cover and there's no way you can hit them, so you have to go around and you have to flank them. Enemies will also flank you or use abilities that like jump them over or look, combat is very, very frantic and you have to balance like dodge rolling, moving around, and taking cover. There are some fights where you have to really focus on taking cover and some fights where you have to focus on moving around and dodging, and some fights where you have to do both, and those are the hardest ones. So I found, while yes, upgrading your character of course will help you out, swapping out abilities that are maybe better for a specific situation will help, you can also just get good, you know, that works too. Okay, so let's talk about loot. I think this is going to be the biggest disappointment for those of you who were hoping for a more traditional ARPG. So the loot is set, doesn't have random stats. What does seem to be random is whether you find them out in the world. Like the drops are random as far as I can tell. Like they'll drop from enemies or they'll be in chests and whatnot. But once you've got a specific automatic rifle, every automatic rifle of that type, of that make and model will be identical. Then you can upgrade the weapons at like a weaponsmith, a weapon upgrade. I can't remember what the NPC is called, but you can take it to a dude in one of the hubs and you can upgrade it. And then, even if you sell that weapon, every single model, every single one of that specific weapon that you pick up after that will be upgraded. So it upgrades that entire line of weapons for you. Now within each weapon category, ARs, submachine guns, shotguns, etc., there are a few different weapons, so you do have a choice there. And like I said, there'll be a difference between the damage types that they do. Some weapons have special effects like lighting enemies on fire, which is a lot of fun. I had an AR that did that, and that was super useful against squishy opponents. You will also need a couple of different weapons of different damage types, because as far as I can tell, energy weapons are better against robots, and ballistic weapons tend to be better against human enemies, or organic enemies rather, because it's not just humans you're fighting, there's aliens. Did I mention there's aliens in this world? There's a lot of friggin' aliens. And the armor is very similar. It sets stats, the drops are random, it does upgrade. Like, you can't upgrade the armor as far as I can tell, but you will find upgraded versions of them out in the world. So you'll get armor piece A, and then you might find armor piece B, and then you'll find armor piece A again, but it's like the next level up. That sort of thing. So you do have control over your weapon upgrades, but the armor upgrades are just like, it's just random. You find them out in the world. And armor will contribute to your stats as well, to your skills, to your attributes. So you probably want to pick armor that is going to play into your build a little bit more, because the skills do have a limit. They can't be upgraded past level 20. So to get more juice out of them, you'll want armor that will boost those abilities. So as you might imagine, this results in you finding a lot of duplicates of the same armor, of the same weapons, and that's going to be probably where most of your money comes from. There's actually a button to sell duplicates when you go to a vendor, which is great. I love that. That's super handy. But it does mean that itemization, like item management, is really simplified, which, honestly, that's probably a good thing. Like, overly complex item management in games is so tedious. But the double-edged sword of that is that the itemization, the implementation of itemization in the game, isn't that deep. You're not going to be pogging out of your gourd being like, yo, I just found this friggin' magical helmet with special stats. Like, there's none of that. All helmets of a specific brand and model are the same, and they just get better with like item rarity and that sort of thing. Okay, so here's the funny thing with the Ascent. It's not quite what I was hoping. But if I didn't have that expectation of it being a traditional ARPG, I wouldn't have played it. And I'm glad I did play it, because for what it is very fun. Now that I've talked about the skills and I've beaten the game and all that, look, it's kind of an ARPG light. I mean, the very first Diablo was pretty simplistic, wasn't it? I can't remember if it had randomized loot or if all the short swords were identical, but the skills were pretty simplistic. I mean, you could only really have one skill slotted at any one time, and you had to swap it out because it was all bound to right click or something. So, like, if you think about it that way, the Ascent is kind of an old school, almost like PS2 era isometric action RPG, like kind of Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance-esque, which is kind of cool. And I gotta say, like, something I really haven't talked about at all is the world and the visuals. I'm not much of a graphics whore, I mean, one of my favorite games of all time is Factorio, and to be fair, I think it looks lovely. I love the art style of Factorio, but most people look at that game and they go like, what the fuck, man? But honestly, the Ascent is a stunning game. Even without ray tracing, I played most of the game with ray tracing off because there was a bug with ray tracing and DX12. It was like glitching out and performance was horrible. So I played most of the game without ray tracing and it still looks amazing. The way they built the world with all the little details in it is just so full of life. And on top of that, the way they've played with the lighting is absolutely stunning. The way I would describe the world is like Star Wars mixed with traditional cyberpunk mixed with the Matrix. There are some elements of the game that are very Matrixy, and I kind of like that. It's a very gritty cyberpunk world, It's beautiful, man. It's honestly, it's one of the best looking games I've ever seen, and not just because of pure graphical fidelity. They're playing to their strengths here, They've designed it in a way that it just looks amazing. I love it. Alright, so let's get down to brass tacks here. Like, hard recommendations or not. Yeah, I'd recommend the Ascent, but you gotta be aware that you're not going in for a traditional ARPG. There's no end game. When you beat the game, you beat the game. You can go back and do side quests. But if you want to play again, you got to roll up a new character. There is a decent amount of build diversity here, so if you do enjoy the combat, which is fun and pretty engaging, and there's a decent amount to do, it's not just point and shoot. If you enjoy the combat enough and the story enough to run through it again, yeah, there's enough build diversity here that you can play it through at least a couple times and have pretty different combat experiences based on your abilities, your skills, your attributes. So if you're waiting for the next big ARPG, best keep waiting until Path of Exile 2. Oh man, can't wait for that. But if you want something that's going to take about 15 to 20 hours, I beat the game in about 17 hours. Maybe could have done it quicker if I was a little more efficient with my leveling. But you know, if you're looking for a 15 to 20 hour sort of ARPG light experience with this beautiful cyberpunk world, some pretty crude, lewd humor if you're into that sort of thing, and the ability to play with friends, yo, the Ascent's got you covered. I had a lot of fun with it. Looks absolutely amazing. And you know what? Maybe I'll play it again. Maybe I'll play it again with a different build. That'll be fun. Alright guys, what do you think of the Ascent? Were you hoping for something a little bit different like I was, or is this right up your alley? Let me know in the comments below the like button. But for the moment, thank you very much for watching. Be excellent to each other. And I'll see you next time. Ricky Summer, out.